depending on how Al was feeling, he would either blame me or credit me for getting him involved. The 1913 was running up in Calistoga, so I took Al up there to show him the place on the possibility that he might be interested in becoming a silent partner. And his response was he was very appreciative of us thinking of him, and he simply didn't want to be involved in something that far away from home. When Maxfield saw that his business wasn't going to go, effectively he had built his railroad in the wrong place, on the wrong highway. He didn't have the tourist traffic. So he offered it for sale to Al, and I don't know what the original offer was. Al said, oh gee, I'm not interested. So Maxfield called him back maybe 6 months later, and he'd lowered his price, and no, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. And I guess there was a third call. Maxfield asked him then before they closed the conversation, he says, well, just for general interest, he said, what would you be willing to pay for it if you were interested? And Al said, oh, I couldn't possibly see spending more than $100,000 on something that was going to be just for fun. Well, Maxfield was crestfallen because that was way below what he'd originally asked, and it was way below what he needed to compensate him for his losses. But a couple of weeks later, he called Al back and he said, I've decided to take you up on your offer. He says, whoa, wait a minute, I didn't make an offer, we were just talking. And Bob told him, well, he says, it's yours for $100,000 if you'll take it, because I don't know what's going to happen to it otherwise. Al told me that about that time, he had bought a piece of land up here, minuscule compared to Al's big land, and he'd paid $100,000 for it. It didn't fit into his ranch plans. He didn't particularly desire to have it. He had no draw to take it, except the people that owned the land had an easement across his land to get to theirs. They were constantly being negligent and leaving Al's gates open, and his cattle were getting out. He says, basically, I paid $100,000 to eliminate an irritation from my life. And he says, I decided that if I was willing to spend $100,000 for that, I might as well spend $100,000 for some fun. And he called Maxfield back and made the deal. The first time the engine was fired up here was New Year's Eve, 79, 80. They had just a few feet of track outside. They counted the exhaust beats, and it was something like 20 or 22 chugs before they had to stop. And then they chug back into the barn again. But they chug outside and then they blow the whistle. It was around 82, there was an estate auction, and Al talked to some of his buddies. Neil Vodden was one, Charlie Hoyle was another, Severn was there. They took along Eric Thompson from the Redwood Valley Railway fame. It was his shop, actually, that reconditioned the 1913 for Maxfield to run it. Neil was planning on bidding on the 1500, which he did and bought it. Eric was along as a friend and advisor. So Al was always frugal. One of the rental car companies had a special on that particular weekend. You could rent top-of-the-line Lincoln Continental Town Car. It had unlimited mileage, which was not a common thing back then, or as common as it is now. So they could rent this thing and drive all the way to Orange County in style. One of the guys, as the auction was going on and Al was bidding on this stuff, somebody said, who are these folks? And of course, Al looked like just a common farmer there in his overalls, like he always was. Who is this guy and these guys that are bidding on all this stuff? And somebody else says, well, I don't know, but they showed up in that Lincoln over there. I don't know whether that cooled the bidding or not. Al came away, well, Al and the guys, because they were acting like a committee essentially, but it was Al footing the bill. They came away with just about everything. God, so many stories.